Since Confederation in 1867, two parties have really grabbed the narrative in Canadian politics: the Liberals and the Conservatives. However, they weren't always called the Conservatives. There's so much underneath the layer of conservatism in Canada that I thought it'd be a good idea to go over conservatism in Canada. That's what we're doing. We're doing an episode now, I forget, I think it's part 6, from 1984 to around 1993. We left off with Pierre Elliott Trudeau resigning as leader of the Liberal Party and as Prime Minister. So he gets replaced on the 16th of June in the 1984 Liberal leadership race by John Turner. He gets in on the second ballot over Jean Chrétien, but barely. And now Turner is the Prime Minister. And Turner, actually, he's seeing that for the longest time, the Conservatives were dominating in the polls. But after Trudeau's resignation and Turner's installation as the leader, it was creeping slowly up and up and up the Liberals' polling numbers. So Turner thought it would be a good idea to call the election a little bit early. And that's what he does. He calls the election for the 4th of September in 1984. So that's when the next election is. And he loses. So those polls were fake. He loses big time. He goes from 135 seats to 40, losing 95. But Ed Broadbent and the New Democratic Party didn't actually suffer all too much. They went from 31 seats to 30. Meanwhile, Brian Mulroney's Progressive Conservatives went from 100 seats to 211. Absolutely huge majority, winning 50% of the vote. It's the last time in Canadian history that someone has won over 50%, and one of the only times that a candidate has ever gotten over 50%. Since this video is all about Brian Mulroney, I thought we should take this attempt at Brian Mulroney's premiership thematically rather than chronologically. So we're going to actually start off with his economic policy. When he was instated as opposition leader, he actually said that social programs were a sacred trust. However, when he became prime minister, he started to reduce expenditures on the programs when he came into office. In terms of old age security, Mulroney's government gradually reduced its benefit at middle income levels and above. Mulroney's government cut spending for unemployed insurance and reduced the range of workers covered by the benefits from the programs in their first budget in 1985. The Mulroney government announced that the registered home ownership saving plans contributions would not be deductible if made after May 22nd in 1985, regardless of the use. And no contribution could be made after December 31st, 1985. In 1985, Mulroney's government introduced a 4-year plan to restructure family benefits. Starting in 1986, family allowances were partially indexed to the cost of living. For 3 years, from 1986 until 1988, the refundable child tax credits were increased to $549 per year. Starting in 1989, the tax credits were partially indexed at the same manner as family allowances that same year as part of the government's program to target social benefits to low or middle income Canadians. Universal family allowances ended as high income parents were required to repay all of their benefits at tax filing times. His government also reduced the federal workforce by 1% from every year from 1986 to 1991, resulting in the layoff of 11,000 federal employees. When it came to his deficit, the worldwide recession of the early 1990s significantly damaged the government's financial situation. Mulroney's inability to improve the government's finances, as well as his use of tax increases to deal with it, were major factors in alienating the Western conservative portion of his power base, where most of his support actually is. When it comes to taxation, Mulroney's government de-indexed personal income tax brackets and eliminated open corporate tax loopholes. The government also increased taxes on alcohol, tobacco, and gasoline. In 1988, Mulroney's government reduced the corporate income tax from 36% to 28%. That year, his government increased the capital gains tax inclusion rate from 50% to 66.67%, before increasing it to 75% in 1990. His government also passed a major tax reform bill, Bill C-139, which was made effective on New Year's Day in 1988, and included reforms for personal and corporate income taxes. The bill expanded the tax base for personal and corporate income, lowered rates applicable to taxable income, supplanted exemptions with credit, and removed certain deductions for personal income tax. This bill replaced the 1987 rate schedule of 10 brackets, with rates ranging from 6 to 34%, with a schedule of only 3 brackets, with rates of 17%, 26%, and 29%. But of course, when everyone thinks about Mulroney's taxation, everyone talks about how in August 1989, he introduced the Goods and Services Tax to replace the hidden 13.5% manufacturer's sales tax. In 1988, Mulroney issued an official apology on behalf of the Canadian government for the Japanese-Canadian internment during World War II. His government provided a $300 million compensation package, which included $21,000 to each of the remaining 13,000 survivors, $12 million for a Japanese community fund, and $24 million to create a Canadian Race Relations Foundation. Mulroney argues he set up the Deschamps Commission of Inquiry of Nazi war criminals soon after he was first elected in 1984, even though it was controversial among communities where Nazi criminals posed as respectable citizens. On the issue of abortion, Mulroney declared that he was opposed to abortion on demand, but gave no details on what that means legally. In the spring of 1988, the Mulroney government offered a compromise solution that would give easy access to abortion in the early stages of pregnancy and criminalize late-term ones. The law in the House of Commons was defeated 147 to 76 in a free vote, voted against both by MPs who opposed easy access to abortion and those who opposed adding any abortion rules to the criminal code. I'm sure you probably already know this, but as Prime Minister, Mulroney strengthened Canada's relations with the United States, moving away from Pierre Elliott Trudeau's third option policy of reducing American influence on Canada. Mulroney established a close relationship with United States President Ronald Reagan. On March 17th, he attended the Shamrock Summit between Mulroney and Reagan, which was held in Quebec City, where they were talking about camaraderie between Canada and the United States. How far we've fallen. The Air India Flight 182 bombing, which originated in Montreal, occurred on the 23rd of June, 1985. This was the largest terrorist attack before the September 11th attacks, with the majority of the 329 victims being Canadian citizens. Mulroney sent a letter of condolences to Indian Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi, sparking an uproar in Canada since he did not call the families of the actual victims to offer condolences. Furthermore, there were several warnings from the Indian government to the Mulroney government about terrorist threats towards Air India flights. Questions remain as to why these warnings were not taken more seriously and whether the events leading to the bombing could have been prevented. Mulroney was also a big hater of apartheid, which was in South Africa, basically making the white minority effectively rule the country at the expense of the black majority. And he actually supported putting sanctions on South Africa. Now, that doesn't seem too radical. That probably was the right thing to do, but this actually put him at odds with the British Prime Minister, Margaret Thatcher, known for being a sane, rational woman, who opposed she opposed apartheid, but she also opposed putting sanctions on South Africa because she believed it would hurt economic ties between the two countries. And Reagan, Mulroney's buddy, also opposed apartheid, but also opposed putting sanctions because he believed Nelson Mandela was a communist. The biggest thing about the Brian Mulroney prime ministership, and probably the only thing you remember about it, was free trade. He signed the CUSFTA, Canada-United States Free Trade Agreement, in 1989, which was between Canada and the United States, and was a free trade agreement. It's right in the name. However, later the next year, he signed into NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement, which now included Mexico. It seems like everyone should have supported this. However, the Liberals and the NDP were opposed to it because they felt the Mulroney was selling out Canada to America. And a lot of people actually felt the same way. It's shown in the 1988 election. Mulroney did win re-election with a majority government and 169 seats, but John Turner's Liberals went from 38 seats before the election to 83. And Ed Broadbent in the NDP went from 32 seats before to 43. So Mulroney was losing support very, very quickly and very, very indefinitely. However, there was one province that seriously did not like Prime Minister Mulroney, and that would be Quebec. You see, Mulroney had spent most of his prime ministership trying to get Quebec on board with the Constitution. Yeah, like that was gonna happen. Like, come on. Seriously, Quebec? They're not gonna agree to the Constitution. But anyways, Mulroney tried something called the Meech Lake Accord, which tried getting Quebec on board. And now, to grossly oversimplify, because if I read it, I can make a whole video about this. I'm not going to, but I could. He tried to basically make Quebec give up some of their rights in order to become Canadian and get on board with the Canadian Constitution. And they wanted to get rid of the Parti Québécois, which was a nationalist party within Canada, and they had some shady origins, but we're going to move past that. Now, Meech Lake Accord was a significant failure. Made Quebec really, really not support Brian Mulroney. So he tried the Charlottetown Accord, which was a little bit different, but it gave provinces jurisdiction over forestry, mining, and cultural affairs, so Quebec could start doing that. However, this also failed really, really badly, and definitely hurt Mulroney's standing, and also Joe Clark's standing, because he was there too, in the province of Quebec. By 1993, Mulroney's tax hikes were not helping the economy, and everybody, not even just in Quebec, hated his guts. People in the West hated his guts. People in Quebec hated his guts. Everyone hated his guts except for maybe some people. I don't know. Not very many people liked him. By 1993, he gave way. His policies gave way to two separatist parties. The Reform Party, which I guess wasn't really a separatist party, but they felt like Western alienation and wanted more rights for the Western people. And of course the Bloc Québécois, which is most definitely a separatist party. The Bloc Québécois actually got official opposition in the 1993 election, because Mulroney stepped down in June of 1993 for Kim Campbell, who won 2 seats in the entire House. Of 295, Kim Campbell could only win 2 seats. Not even her own. Shameful for the progressive conservatives, and would actually end up killing them, but I'm going to leave it here. Alright, so there you have it. That was the Prime Minister so bad, he made an entire province want to leave the country. And you could argue that 2 provinces, and you can include Alberta into that, wanting to leave the country. But I think I'll stick for 1 in the title. But anyways, thank you guys for watching. Do you guys agree with this? Do you think Mulroney was a bad prime minister? I honestly don't think he was that bad, but I also didn't live through his prime ministership, so I couldn't really tell you that much. But it's up to you to decide.